now tuned in to the Commissioner's Conversation.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is
Commissioner Gordon.
Yes, sir. Welcome back. You are tuned into the Commissioner's Conversation. I am your host, Commissioner Gordon. And today, in the YouTube edition of the Commissioner's Conversation, I got my guy with me. We go way back like Stevie Wonder's hairline, man. I'm talking about, we go way back. My guy, home team, Brandon Lee, all the way from 680 The Fan, joining us right now. Home team, what's happening, brother? How you feeling?
Commissioner, good to see you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
All the time, you know, like I said, we were just talking a little earlier, man, and it's like family, you know, because we so deep rooted into what we've done in the past. And every time, I was just telling a friend of mine not too long ago, it's like every time I see you, like we don't really get a chance to see each other that often, but every time I see you, it's like, you know, talking to a family member. So, you know, always welcome. Anytime you want to stop by, you know, please do. And you always bring the knowledge. You know, you always, you know, educated into what you're saying, and you drop some gems off on me. So I greatly always appreciate that.
Anytime.
So with today being NBA trade deadline, everybody was amped up and geared up and all these assumptions, and Kyle Lowry's moving and this guy's moving, John Collins might be moving. Everybody was so amped up. Do you think that it lived up to the hype?
I think that, you know, anytime you don't have superstars move, it will probably be a little less of a sparkle when you look at it in its totality. But the truth is, there are some teams that have been changed. And sometimes change is immediate, and sometimes change takes a few years. But there are clearly some teams that have been changed by the moves that went down. I think the biggest move was what happened with Victor Oladipo. I mean, the fact that Miami didn't have to give up any of their core pieces in order to get him. And he is a guy that will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. But getting in Miami, getting in there with Jimmy Butler, and maybe getting a good taste and a good run in the playoffs might make it easier for him to pick them as a team to stay and to stay in the East. The fact that, again, they basically got him for sandpaper and sardines to get the man up in there. Now Miami has, you know, something that they can work with. I think what the Hawks did was a win in that they had to say goodbye to a veteran presence and a veteran point guard who clearly, when he's on the floor, makes a difference. But the truth is, he's not available every single night. Rajon Rondo, I think the plan was to hold him for the playoffs, and Travis Schlenk said as much. The plan was they knew he wasn't going to play every single night, but if they could get him to the playoffs, that's certainly a piece that would make the Hawks a better team. But getting Lou Williams to come back, you get a professional shooter, you get more firepower off the bench, which is one of the issues of the Hawks, the up and down and inconsistency of the bench. And I think when you get into those games where you need a guy to take over, and Trae Young and John Collins are sitting down, Lou Williams is a perfect fit. So I think there are a couple of teams that won and changed themselves for the better. We'll just see who wins long-term and who makes the most out of it this year.
Also with that, with the Lou Williams pickup for Atlanta, you also get that veteran leadership that you were looking for out of Rondo. So it's not like it's a major drop-off in terms of getting younger or losing that leadership. I think you get that because Lou's a vet, and Lou's been through it all the way from the Allen Iverson days. So it's not like he's this young, wet behind the ears type player who's just going to come in and there's going to be an ego clash, or there's going to be someone who's going to try to bully him or run over him. He's going to be an influence in the locker room, and probably a positive influence for a lot of those younger players. One quick thing that I did want to talk about, Vucevic going to the Chicago Bulls. Now, we talked about the power structure being changed and the dynamic being changed. Does that catapult the Bulls into a top three player in the East?
I don't think it moves them that far, but I think it goes to what I was saying earlier about some change is immediate and some change you see over time. And I think they're one of the teams where the change will take place over time. Now, right now, they sit in the 10th playoff position as we do this. And the difference between 10th and 4th is 3.5 games.
Right.
So can Nikola Vucevic make a difference? And now he's playing with the Zach LaVine, and now he's playing with, another guy who is an all-star. That has changed that, moving forward, even if they don't make it in the play-in tournament or if they don't make it in the playoffs moving forward, those are two pretty good pieces to attract other guys and move forward. So I think that change gives them now more than a puncher shot, because I think they were one of those teams that was a little lesser than the Knicks, a little lesser than the Hawks. And now at least they have a 1-2 punch where at the end of a close game, they have a couple of guys that might be able to win some games. And so I think that move might be able to give them the opportunity to hang around for the playoff tournament and possibly get into a situation where they can start winning games if they can go on the streak, maybe get the 6th seed. And they don't have to worry about the tournament. They might be inside the playoffs just on what they do in the regular season.
Now with that, like I said, with that narrow margin in the East, just strictly focusing in the East, with that narrow margin from 4 to 11, like you just emphasized, because I get into it with a lot of different people all the time. We were talking about the Hawks, and I was like, look, a hot streak will put you there.
Right.
And the Hawks are going through this brutal, and they're handling, I will give them that, they're handling the West Coast trip a little better than I thought they would. I mean, I don't know what your expectations were, but when I saw the Clippers, the Lakers, OKC, Phoenix, they were going through it. I'm saying, whew, we're looking at 2, maybe 3 wins, but they're doing pretty good on that West Coast trip. What do you think about how they're moving?
Well, I was a little arrogant with them going into the West Coast. They had put down 7 in a row. They started playing a lot better defense. They weren't having the lulls they were early in the season. They were making shots. Danilo Gallinari woke up and started acting like he had a whole lot of money in his bank account to make shots for the Atlanta Hawks. So the whole thing, Tony Snell wasn't missing anything, still isn't. So my expectations, if they went 4-4, I started calling shots. Steph Curry is they were up and down. Let's go get the Kings. Let's go get the Warriors. Let's go get the Pelicans. Start calling them out. And then when I saw them get the Lakers, I said, there you go. So 4-4 is what I had. Now, after the streak is over, 2 losses in a row, you're just hoping that they get some of the mojo back. And I think that the West Coast trip will reveal where they should be. If they didn't win 7, or if they hadn't won 8 in a row, say they would gone 4-4, they'd be out of the playoffs right now. So that 8-game win streak put them in a place where they still have some control over their own fate, and they're gonna be playing some teams that are scrappy. San Antonio is still trying to find their way, but they're scrappy. The Suns are scrappy. The Pelicans, they get up big on teams and they lose games at the end, but they still have a young core. So there's nothing given to the Hawks, and I just think that where they end up, this West Coast road trip could have a lot of say in that. So they need to get themselves together, and it starts, I think, with they need to be the team when the other guy's best player is out. You have to find a way to win that game. They did that when AD and LeBron were out. They hadn't been able to do that, for some other teams. But if the other guy's not there, their superstar's not there, the Hawks have to be the team. No more. We just automatically are a get-right team for teams like that. Right.
And you emphasize that on your show as well as your podcast, or the drop step that you have, and listening to that, it you guys, it's kind of like a whole barbershop talk, and feels like I'm right there on the set with you guys, because a lot of the stuff that you're saying is questions that I'm asking, and as I'm asking them to myself as I'm riding, you're asking them, or Joe's asking them, and the difference, a lot of people ask me, what is the difference with Coach Nate McMillan from Lloyd Pierce? And that was one of the things that I said, the finishing of the games, like the finishing of them, because it seemed like they were just not really quit, because quit is a terrible word, but it just seemed like if we were up and it was late, they would just assume that you would lay down and say, okay, and pack it in, as opposed to now, they put the nail in the coffin more times than not.
Yeah, I think, well, one, cutting all of the bull, Nate McMillan is a better coach than Lloyd Pierce. And I'm a Lloyd Pierce fan. One thing I've learned during the transition with the interim tag is there are some hardcore Hawks fans that just they're not going to budge if you don't agree with them. And I think that's a good thing to some degree. Some folks, you just can't talk them into anything, which is good to some degree. You want a passionate fan base, but there's some infighting of, well, see, if LP had been gone, he was holding us back. there's some truth in that. Cutting the bull, Nate McMillan has been a coach for a couple of decades. Nate McMillan has coached superstars and Ray Allen and Hall of Famers and Ray Allen, and he's coached Patrick Ewing before, and he's coached guys who have been some of the best players in the game. Plus, he's a player who's played the game. So he's a better coach. That's number one. Number two, the team is responding to him. Part of a coach's deal is you have to get the most out of the players, and some of the coaching style and strategy, which has been revealed. Some of us had known some things behind the scenes for a while, but some things that have been revealed now publicly, maybe he didn't handle it right. Maybe he was a little bit too early in his coaching stage to be mature to handle players a little bit differently. The other thing is, not to take away from Nate McMillan, they're playing better. You don't have to like the coach to play defense. You don't have to like the coach to hit wide open threes. You don't have to. My perfect example is Lloyd Pierce's last game. Danilo Gallinari went 0 for 7 from behind the three-point line, and they lost a close game. The next few games within that one, they started making shots, and Danilo Gallinari set a Hawks record for three-pointers made in a game by Hawks. If he was doing some of that, while the other coach was still here and still maybe not doing things, maybe the wins would have softened up some of the tension behind the scenes. So it is incumbent on a coach to get the most out of his players. You have to give Nate McMillan credit. They are playing. They are responding better. And like you said, they're finishing better. And I think that is something to do with the change. And the bottom line is, how can they grow now knowing that they do have the pieces, the coach that they like, and the coaching acumen to win games? What are they going to do now that they have seen that if they play a certain way and not play another way, they can beat anybody on any given night?
Now, with that said, you hit on something just now when you said interim head coach, because we all know, if you followed the story, that Nate McMillan had to be talked into taking the job. And he said he was being loyal to Lloyd Pierce, and Lloyd was the one who told him, go ahead and take the gig. And now, what does the front office have to do to convince him to sign a 4-year deal or a long-term deal into coaching these guys? Or is it something that the team has to do? Is it something that he has to see and feel in terms of, okay, I really want to rock with these guys and I want to stay here, as opposed to, oh, that looks like a better job over there, I think I'll go to wherever?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, that's all up to Nate. As you pointed out, he was very honest, and he was pained in Lloyd Pierce being fired, and it wasn't known. And if you listen to what he said, I don't know if it was 22, 24 hours, 22 minutes. There was a point in time when the Hawks didn't know who their coach was,
right?
Because Nate McMillan said he was asleep. Typically when you fire a coach, you either call him in the morning or you tell him the night after a game, hey, we're going to do this in the morning. We'll give the press release at 12, let you, have a chance to say what you want to say, and we'll do it. No, they knew he was going to get fired. Let him have practice. Let him have a practice walkthrough. Let guys go back to the hotel. Then they fired him. So Nate McMillan was asleep when he got a call, say, hey, man, you want to be coach? So he had to think. He told Travis Lee, I have to think on this. So there was a period of time where the Hawks didn't know. So I think there's some things we still don't know. Does Nate McMillan want to be here? His job this year was to be assistant to Lloyd Pierce, helping one of his boys teach guys how to play in the NBA and be an assistant coach. He had no plans of being the head coach and being charged of making the team go to the playoffs. So we don't know if he wants to be here. We know if management has already reached out to try to extend him. Those are conversations not known to us as of yet. So I think Nate McMillan is interviewing Hawks, much like the Hawks might be interviewing him. And he's been there. It's not like he came from outside. So he was there when folks were either accepting or not accepting the coach of Lloyd Pierce. He was in the meetings with Lloyd Pierce when they had their personal conversations about players and what they were supposed to do. So there's some things that he knows uniquely to the position he's been. And it just comes down to whether or not he wants to be a part of it. What I will say is, if he does not, the Hawks need to be very careful in going with their next pick. If he says, I just filled in, thanks for the ride, my family and what I want to do is elsewhere, they're going to have to be quick. Don't wait. Don't go too long without knowing who your coach is going to be. And hopefully it'll be somebody of the ilk of Nate McMillan, that is somebody who has coaching experience, hopefully somebody has played the game and has coaching experience, and somebody who wants to be here for a long time.
Now, we talked about the trade deadline just passing earlier today. And as the season started, throughout the season, up until almost until Nate McMillan was the coach, and John Collins seemingly had this symmetry with Trey during that 8-0 run, and then up until now, everyone talked about trading John Collins. And so now, and I put it in the context of John Collins, but it's happened to a lot of players around the league. There were a lot of players that they were basically saying, whether it was Ben Simmons, whether Kyle Lowry, whatever it was, that they had been hearing, you're going to be traded, you're probably going to be traded, you're probably going to be traded. The deadline comes and goes, and you're still with the squad. And I don't know if a lot of players will look at the team with the side eye a little bit. Like I heard some of the rumors. I was on Twitter. I was looking at Wojo saying, "You're shopping me." I was looking at.
Oh, they see it,
right? So I saw it. So do you side eye, or is that you learning this is a business?
Well, it's incredibly stressful, and especially if you're a younger player, it's probably more stressful if you want to stay in a place. I think John Collins, likes what's going on here. It wasn't Trey Young that was the first pick to start this. It was John Collins. He came the year before Trey. So he's been here and seen the most transition. He's seen the most of the changing of the rosters. He's put in the most work. And he's a guy who now is one of the better players on the team. I think it was the right decision not to trade him. The question becomes, what is his number? Because Travis Schlink, he said at day one that you don't pay superstars, you don't pay non-superstars superstar money. You don't do it. That is not the way to build a championship roster and a championship organization. So what's the question? The question I have is, what's the number that pays John Collins his value without locking him into some, max deal that is hurtful to the team down the road? Because I think Travis Schlenk likes the fact that he has a team full of Tony Snells and Gallinaris and Bogdanoviches and Cam Reddishes and John Collins. He has pieces he can trade. Once you sign John Collins, knowing that you're going to have to give Trey Young a max contract, you don't have as much flexibility. So I think he did the right thing. The question comes down to what is the number, and players just have to understand there is no loyalty. This is a business. You can be traded. Just like, organizations have to learn sometimes when a player says, I don't want to play here anymore. There's no loyalty. It's a business. So it's incredibly difficult for young players, but I'm just glad John Collins has stuck around. And the question will be, what is the number when he hits the market? If they can't work out something before next year and he can take offers from other teams, what is the number Travis Schlenk is willing to pay? And is he willing to let him walk if it's too high?
Well, it seems like the players have learned this for a while now. They've seen the business side of it because they've taken the short end of the stick more times than not, a lot of times. But what's happening now, and it's funny, what's happening is the franchises are just now getting to the point where the player is making the demands, and the rabbit has the gun, and you see a James Harden say, this ain't gonna work. Like in the press conference, like, make no bones about it, this ain't gonna work. I don't want to be here, and pretty much walk off. And you see, I think Victor Oladipo roundabout did the same thing. Like, he didn't go out as far as James Harden, but he pretty much made it known that he didn't want to be there. And now players are starting to do that more, and franchises are getting used to having to meet demands of players as opposed to just saying, no, you're under contract, because you were under contract for 10, 12 years back in the 80s and 90s, and we didn't have to move you. You could just be mad, or you could just sit down.
That part is an interesting discussion because, the one league that does, have the most player power is the NBA. They're able to make, the most amount of money for games played, the most amount of money of revenues generated, the most amount of opportunity in a window of a career, some of them long and some of them short. It is an interesting situation. Percent of the time, most people are on the side of the fans, and they side with the players, and you want players to be able to go where they want, make as much as they want. I think there is a conversation, particularly when you start talking about the real numbers of what the pandemic cost the league. $800 million that is just gone forever, and what that does to the coffers of player salaries of guys who aren't even in the NBA yet. I think that we find this upcoming year. The next year, we have to see how, the lack of revenue of that magnitude impacts players coming in. But I think it is a conversation, because while it's good for the players, and certainly the leagues have always thrived on a few teams with great star power, being in primetime spots, holding up the league. The problem is when you look at what has happened to Washington, what has happened to Oklahoma City, what has happened to Houston. They're decimated. Houston, I saw somebody on Twitter said Houston over the next 2 years has 34 draft picks. They could almost field a 53-man roster, and it won't make a hill of beans because they don't have Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, or James Harden anymore. Right. So you have 3 teams that won't be on national TV, that have no superstars if Bradley Beal goes ahead and gets out. And you have franchises that can't market the product, and it'll only be the LAs and the New Yorks and the Miamis, and don't think that they don't want Chicago to have another star. And then you have to start asking, is that best long-term for the league? Obviously, every team can't have a superstar, but you do want to be able to at least have a couple of all-star talented players spotted around the league, or else you're just going to end up with these super teams. And we don't know what the impact long-term that will be as far as people tuning in or tuning out to see the product in its entirety.
Well, that was one of the things that I thought that was a positive about the league, was that even though we had the Los Angeles teams, both Clippers and Lakers, even though we had the Brooklyn Nets, and even though the 76ers, to a degree, but even though we had those type teams where you could look at and you could say those are super teams, we still had a lot of talent spread around. You had young talent in New Orleans. You had young talent in Boston. You had young talent. You had Dame and his whole gang up in Portland. You had talent spread all around the league. And for as much as we talked about the teams that got better with like Chicago and Miami, Orlando just got a bunch of, speaking of draft picks, they just got dirt. Like they literally burned the franchise.
Fish heads and rice. They should have just traded for fish heads and rice. You can't win. You can't win. You can't compete. You can't sell tickets. If you fly down to Disney World and you want to stop over to see a Magic game, you'll probably stay at Disney World a little bit longer. You're not going over there to watch that. So there's good and bad. And obviously, talent is always infused into the league. But I think moving forward, you're going to see, I think one of the best things that happened to the NBA was when Giannis decided to stay in Milwaukee. He's a superstar, MVP, and a guy that plays for a small market, mid-market team, and he stayed. And I think that gives them a shot in the arm to get free agents to go there. You want the Memphises. You want, Atlanta's a top 10 market. You don't want Trae Young to leave and join some super team with somebody else. You want Trae to build a team here in Atlanta, have people come. You want every team to have that opportunity. So I think it is good, player movement and freedom. But the truth is, in any sport, anytime a guy says he wants out and he's a star player, he's out. Yeah. So that's nothing new to the NBA or to what that dynamic is. The question is, long term, is it good for the health of the league when you got number 1 picks and MVPs all on the Brooklyn Nets, and then one of the teams they used to play for has 34 draft picks, but no reason to buy a ticket to go see it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we're gonna have to watch out for. One is some of these bottom feeders. Like, what you as a fan of some of these teams, you have to look around and say, what is our goal? Now, in the terms of Orlando Magic, like, I don't see. Like, yeah, they weren't a top franchise anyway, but at least as a fan, you want to feel like your team is trying. And to see what we just saw today out of Orlando, I wouldn't go to another game. I wouldn't even watch another game.
Well, and the other part of it is the business of the sport, which is if you're not progressing to be a top team or getting close to be attractive to get players to come help you be one of those, you might as well start over. There's nothing to be gained by being the 9th seed. There's nothing to be gained by not progressing forward. And it is sad that you get a Vucevic who clearly is a difference maker, and you couldn't build anything around him. So What do you do? Aaron Gordon, where was he going to take? Where was he going to take him? Disney World. They're not going anywhere. So, sometimes organizations do have to make a hard decision and pivot and say, this isn't going anywhere. And in order to be elite, we're going to have to kind of look towards the draft and look to some other things, because if it's not moving forward in the NBA, the worst thing you can be is average. You'd rather be a really bad team consistently and getting top 3 picks than just being average, missing the playoffs or going in the first round and losing, and then not improving on that for 5, 6, 7 years.
And see, with that, we know about how that feels in terms of being here in Atlanta, because we've had that happen to us a few times, and just seem like you're just treading water, so to speak, because you're not getting any better, but you don't totally stink to the point where, like you said, you're getting that top number 1, number 2 pick. But even with that, like, I don't know if they can they're going to have to package up some of those picks to try to bring in a player and make a trade in the offseason. And then if they are lucky enough to hit that lottery, do you see a transcending player? There's no LeBron. There's no, not even a Zion. I mean, Zion, there's not even one of those type guys who's going to say, I'm going to fill up the arena because I have him. Like even last year, Charlotte hit with LaMelo Ball. He was box office. I don't know what he would do in terms of wins once his career is all said and done in terms of championships, but you knew you were going to see a player. You knew you were going to see an exciting player. And now, like, if you're looking around the league, there's some guys who have some talent, but Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, some of those guys that are there's nobody really that you're going to say, okay, well, we're in the hunt for XYZ, and that's who we're going to bring into our fan base. We're gonna put his hand up and say, this is going to carry us into 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, I think you got to have star power, and Cade Cunningham, I think, is going to be a nice player. You mentioned Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs out of Gonzaga. They're going to be players, but are you going to pay $80 to go see them? Right. To sit on a lower level ticket, to pay a marquee price to go see that. I think teams like Orlando, the fact that they got a couple of first round picks, maybe you can use that to go pluck a Victor Oladipo level player from a team or a team like John, the Hawks and John Collins, that level of a player where the Hawks are in a good position. Maybe they could take 2 first round picks. And I'm not saying they should, but I'm just using him as an example. But maybe you use picks now to help jumpstart what you're trying to do. But you're right. There is no game-changing generational player coming out of the draft. And so it's just a catch-22. Do you go with something that's not going anywhere, or take a shot at starting over and maybe finding something and then acquiring other pieces from around the league to help you speed up the process?
Well, I mean, you could always do the Brooklyn route where you hope guys get together and just say, we're gonna go kick it over here.
Best way I've seen it. Hey, LeBron, you want to come to Miami? Yeah. Right. Hey, Harden, you want to come over here to Brooklyn? Yeah. That's the best way to make sure you get a good team and accelerate a whole lot of stuff. But a lot of that comes with star players cultivating relationships with other players. And so the next crew, what will Zion Williamson want to do? It looks like Lonzo Ball might not be somebody long-term that they want to pay for. How is he going to feel like that? Is he going to stay in New Orleans or go somewhere else? Is he going to want to team up? Ja Morant, what does he want to do when his number comes? De'Aaron Fox, wow. Sacramento, not a big market, those guys. So, the next crop, once LeBron James and Kevin Durant start to transition into their post-basketball career or their elder statesman careers, what the next version of the NBA looks like is very interesting to me.
And I was hoping that Trey would be one of those players that guys would gravitate to, and guys would say, okay, I like this dude. He's young, he's hip, he's cool. He shares the ball. He's not looking to have it all about me. I was hoping that he would, so that Atlanta could be one of those type places where it say, well, you get a couple guys, whether it's Zion, whether it's whoever, would say, hey, it'd be real dope if we all go kick it in Atlanta and go win a championship. They ain't never won one before. Let's go make history. And I was hoping, but on that same frame, though, I also think that it hurts him when you can't go market, because you were left out of the All-Star game.
Yeah, and I had some opinions that, people didn't have a liking to all of it, and that's what happens in this business. I think Trae Young not making the All-Star game is a referendum on the respect he has as of right now. When he first came into the league, people were very intrigued to see what he was going to do, and then he had a very good rookie season, and so he was rewarded with going to the All-Star game the next year. But I think, it's not the end of the world if you're not an all-star. There are plenty of guys who are good enough that don't make it on a regular basis throughout the annals of history. But I will say, in my opinion, the all-star game is a referendum on your respect in the league. And the fact that there are different avenues to get in: the fan vote, the media vote, the coaches vote, the players vote. And none of those were enough to get Trae Young in this year. So I think some of that had to do with the Hawks' record at the time. They weren't a winning team, and he wasn't hitting, game-winning shots showing up on SportsCenter. But I think that is interesting. So maybe as the Hawks continue to get a little bit more exposure on national TV, if they win those games, if they start to become a team that's exciting to watch, and Trae Young is a big part of that, maybe he does become one of those players where people say, hey, get my agent on the phone and get Travis Schlenk's number so we can figure out what to do. But that certainly will be down the road, and time will tell if Trae can attract other star players to come play with him, because the roster as it's currently constructed, these guys, Danilo Gallinari and Tony Snell and the guys that are helping out right now, 3 years from now, they're not going to be here.
Right.
When the Hawks are ready to be in their high power band and really ascend to the top of the Eastern Conference, you hope they're not going to be here. So trying to get the guys, the Bradley Beals and the John Walls and those level caliber of all-star player, are they have any interest in taking a call from the Hawks to go play with Trae Young? That would be very interesting, and that's something I'm interested to find out.
Now, just fast forwarding up to this season and playoffs of this season, in your opinion, what is the ceiling for the Atlanta Hawks in terms of how far you think they can go in the East, or if you think they could win the whole thing?
No, I don't think they can win the whole thing. They got a lot of growing to do. But that's not the point. If you asked me before the season started, my initial expectation statement was, if they don't make the playoffs, but they are a much improved team, I will accept that. Then when they got off to a decent start, you start looking at the scope of the East. Well, wait a minute. No, they should make the playoffs. They're not a bunch of scrubs, and they are good enough in the Eastern Conference with basically just 3 top-heavy teams to be in the top 10 at the very least to get in the play-in. And I'm saying they should be a top 6 team to make sure that they get in. So expectations change. I think the ceiling could be, I think what we saw when they got on their 8-game winning streak. Could they be better enough? The schedule gets softer towards the end of the season too. Can they take advantage of the schedule and maybe get a 4 seed where you can, look at hosting a first-round playoff series? And my thing is to get to the playoffs and earn your stripes. It would be great for me. I think the ceiling is getting to the playoffs and perhaps winning a first-round series, shocking somebody. That's as far as I think this team is capable of going, because eventually you're going to run into the Sixers, you're going to run into the Bucks, and you're going to run into KD, Kyrie, and the Beard. And I think based on what we have right now, that's where it would end ultimately for the Atlanta Hawks.
Now, speaking of that.
And there's no shame in that.
Right. Totally. Not at all. And I honestly believe that Philly, they're no world beater. We could possibly give them a run. I don't know if we could beat them in 7 games, but we can give them all they can handle. Same with even Milwaukee. Like, we know what Coach Bud likes to do. It's just trying to contain the Greek Freak and trying to keep him away from the basket so where we can force him to shoot more outside shots than he wants to. And what do you make of this situation in Brooklyn, though, man? This is the question of all questions, because it seems like they're rotating superstars. Kyrie just basically just told the Nets that he doesn't feel like going on the road because he just doesn't want to.
Yeah, I don't know if the NBA is his part-time job. He wants to be off, he's off. You fill out his leave for him, he's out. He's got that kind of cachet. I guess they're looking at it, look, we know we're going to the playoffs. All these games are meaningless now. We have enough cushion. With Kyrie, go and do what you have to do.
All right. So And I said in my podcast, I knew that Kyrie would be this type of guy. I knew he would be this type of problem. I'm assuming that even if I knew this, I'm assuming that somebody in Brooklyn knew it too.
Yeah, they do.
But they were hoping that he would be on his best behavior. I was just thinking that at some point in time, that the players would get tired of answering questions that were maybe meant for Kyrie, but Kyrie's not getting them because he's not there.
The one thing I'll say is Kyrie is just he's hot and cold. Players like playing with him. Sometimes it's a problem when he's on his way out, and most times players defend their teammates. And we don't know what his personal stuff that he has going on is. So maybe they are a little bit more in tune. So they'll be a little bit more sensitive to why he needed to leave. That being said, he is a star player, and stars aren't treated the same as everybody else. The other thing, like you said, everybody knew Kyrie comes with something extra. So they knew that. And my wife tells me all the time when, she's doing stuff while I'm doing stuff, who you married. So you know what's coming. You know, if you do this, then that's what's coming. Or if I do this, that's what's coming. So they know who they married and what they got and what they asked for. And I think ultimately, as long as they are winning, they aren't a disappointment. They win games when he's there. And there doesn't seem to be any acrimony between the players, the superstars, and the coach. If it is, we don't know anything about it. So they're winning, and that's all that matters in professional sports.
But when it comes playoff time and everyone's healthy and everyone's quote unquote locked in, I think it's going to be something said about the chemistry. We're going to see the true character of the Nets, because if KD's healthy and KD's back, and you got Kyrie, he's healthy and he's back. James Harden, it seems like he's the captain of the ship. But when those two guys come back, then you throw in Blake Griffin, and he wants to be a part of something because he was absolutely just twiddling his thumbs up in Detroit. He's going to want to be a part of something, and we're going to see what kind of chemistry they're going to have. To me, that could partly be their undoing. But do you think the talent would just override all of those issues?
Well, I think, just legacy wise, those guys, the big three in Brooklyn, they have to get rid of a lot of butts. I say that to say, KD is a champion. He's MVP and a champion, but he didn't win without Clay and Jordan and Steph Curry. Kyrie, he's a champion, but he didn't do it without LeBron James. He was in there in Cleveland. They were going nowhere without LeBron James. James Harden, MVP, making all these free throws, scoring all these points, but he's never won when he had the Golden State Warriors on the ropes. So it's one of those deals where hopefully you hope things work out and things just get better moving for them down the road.
Out west, I thought that the Lakers would probably be more of a player than they were today in terms of trying to pick up someone. But when you think about it, Andre Drummond, I personally would sit and wait for Andre Drummond to get bought out, and would assume everybody can't go to Brooklyn. All right, everybody can't go to Brooklyn. I mean, I guess technically they could, but I'm assuming that I think I've seen somewhere though he has a relationship with LeBron. So I would assume that LeBron has already been in his ear like, hey, when you get your shot, when you get your freedom, come on over and holler at your guy. And I think that would be a pivotal move for the Los Angeles Lakers in terms of them separating themselves. Because right now, I think they're one of those teams, like you said about Brooklyn. They know they're going to make the playoffs. They're just basically just buying time.
Yeah, I thought that the move would be to, see if they could get Kyle Lowry or Lonzo Ball or somebody to help them with another player that gave them some ball handling, 3-point shooting. Lonzo would have given them a little bit of, defense as well. So it'll be interesting to see, that team is just a completely different team without AD and LeBron. So banking that both of those guys will be healthy at the end of the season when they start the playoff run. Andre Drummond does become interesting because it's another body. So guys will get all the rebounds. They can, maybe take some more 3-pointers because they have extra rebound in there, and they clearly have somebody to help share the load in the paint where LeBron just doesn't have to put his head down and use all of his energy just driving to the bucket. Yeah.
So I won't hold you to a prediction right now. I want to see how this thing play out a little bit. I'm going to keep that extended so that to invite you to come back and give the finals prediction on what you think will happen in terms of the playoffs. But I kind of want to move forward from the NBA over to the NFL draft. And locally, once again, here in Atlanta, we have the number 4 pick. But with that number 4 pick, there's no clear-cut answer. In your opinion, what do you think the Atlanta Falcons should do with that pick?
The Atlanta Falcons are so broke and so broken that any pick would be the right pick. If they said kicker, they pick a kicker at number 4. Hell yeah, you just signed your kid a 1-year deal. Maybe you need a kicker. Maybe it's something we don't know. I really thought it was time to start to turn the page and change quarterbacks. And that will be an ever-going debate. I thought, what Mike Vick was and what wasn't was going to be the last, long-term, lifelong debate we were going to have as Falcon fans. But now to be Matt Ryan. What is Matt Ryan? Because people would say he's got $40 million contracts, but he's not a $40 million player. Other people would say, you know what? No team wins and no quarterback wins when the team is raggedy. And so it's just something that keeps going round and round. Based on the moves that they've made, I'm thinking it makes no sense to draft a quarterback knowing that you are going to have to probably pay Matt Ryan with his dead money now being $48 million next year. It doesn't make any sense to draft a quarterback with the number 4 pick and sit him, and we won't be able to see him until 2024. That makes no sense. So I'm starting to feel like they probably find a dance partner, somebody that wants one of these quarterbacks, swap picks with them, and maybe they get a couple of players. Maybe you get your Najee Harris, and maybe you get an offensive lineman. Maybe you get an offensive lineman, and you get a defensive end. But it's starting to feel like they're not going to completely turn the page. And it's going to be a situation where we're just going to have to be patient because the salary cap is just so jacked up. The defense is so bad. You just let 2 starting safeties, Rico Allen, walk out of the door, and Keanu Neal, they're just walked out because you can't afford them. You just signed a running back, Mike Davis, who was the backup in Carolina last year. So now he's your starter unless you draft another running back. So they have so many questions and holes to fill. I don't know what they're going to do. You have me back on because I have no idea what they're going to be doing at 4. And I don't know if they know at this point. They could take quarterback. They could take offensive lineman. They could go defense. We just don't know.
Yeah, and I think you said it best. If you can find a person, a team that's desperate to get a quarterback and that'll come in. But at the same time, if you swap picks, you can't go too far back. So that would only limit you to a certain number of teams. So how far back are you willing to go? Are you willing to go? You say we'll give up our 4 if you give us 12, and you give us 2nd round and your 4th round or something, or whatever. How far back are you willing to go to say, okay, well maybe we like Patrick Surtain, and we think he'll be in there in that 10, 12, 14, 13 range. How far back do you think that the Falcons should be willing to go?
That's a very good question. I think it depends on how they order their draft board and what do they want. If you want, Patrick Surtain, Tyson Campbell, if you want a cornerback put on the other side of A.J. Terrell and then something else, what that something else is and how they order it is the determiner. I just think as a fan, look, man, we watched 4 games. We watched losing for 3 months. For 4 months, we watched losing. I would think you, me, and nobody else who went through that should have to see that for another generation. So the fact it was so bad, why wouldn't you pick the best player? Make number 4 mean something. The best player we got. And if he doesn't pan out, if he turns out to be a bust, how can anybody be mad that you took the best player available for a team that has so many questions? That being said, I understand with being 4, you might not have that much cachet to have trade value in something that somebody really wants that badly for a while. So if you can package that up and get the 2 second best players that you could get out of a number 4 pick, I just think we need to give Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot a lot of leeway because they don't have the same shot that other organizations have. Because they have no money and they don't have the ability to move players who have all the money that are holding them up for moving forward.
And now that was one of the things that I did say. I talked to a friend of mine who's big Saints fan, and he was messing with us. He was messing with me, talking about us getting Fontenot. And I was saying that was the one thing that I did respect about the Saints. Like, it always looked like they were strapped for cash. They were always in the hole, and somehow they would pull out a free agent that would help them out. Somehow they would do something that would get them there. And if Fontenot could bring that to the Falcons, knowing how hard up we are for money, then I'm all for it, because we are in desperate need of cheap labor. And that was one of the reasons why I say, okay, if we can pull back, if we maybe trade 4 and get a bunch of picks, then I'm with it. Like, I'm kind of with you. There is no wrong answer to this, but I understand if someone says, okay, we're going to trade this pick and we're going to try to accumulate more picks from that, because we need bodies. We need guys who can come in and play.
Well, I'm not mad at Terry Fontenot for messing up the Saints salary cap, because they were in a different position. First, I thank him for doing that on the way out. Appreciate you, bruh. And now we can, maybe jump ahead of them now that Drew Brees has decided to retire. But I say that tongue in cheek because he did it for a reason. They had offensive line problems. They fixed the offensive line. They couldn't get people to come. He got people to come, and they drafted well on defense. So they paid a quarterback who had been there forever, and they gave him 2, $50 million contracts and gave him his money on the way out. That being said, he went all in on a team that could win a Super Bowl. And the question becomes, is it worth it if you do win the Super Bowl? The Saints went to the playoffs 4 years in a row, once hosting the NFC Championship game, in a game a lot of them would say, was taken away from them because of the officials. I say officials have a tough job to do, and they can't see everything. That being said, stuff happens you have to overcome. And they got the ball in overtime and threw a pick. They don't want to talk about that either. Right. That being said, they lost a game at home on the final play, overtime kick to the Rams. They lost to the Vikings. When Stephon Diggs got them. They lost to the Vikings again when they had Kyle Rudolph catch a touchdown in overtime. So he went all in on a team that was going to the playoffs and had a shot to win a Super Bowl. I don't have a problem with that. The problem is you pay the piper at the end of it, and they just didn't execute. And it's a funny thing that happens when they're not able to cheat and do dirty plays, and the coach is not getting fined. It's mighty funny what happens when they don't have anything extra going on in New Orleans, and they have to play by the rules.
Exactly. Just keeping it in Atlanta, like, what was your vote? Because like everyone was split. Pretty much everyone is split. You heard people once we got Dan Quinn out, and we knew, you said it earlier, are you going to turn the page? Because I had people saying, well, we need to move on from Julio. We need to move on from Matt Ryan. We need to move on from these guys and start this thing anew. Or you have the people who are entirely different camp saying, we still got a good offense. We just got to tighten up the defense, and we still got a shot. We can go for it. What boat were you in?
Julio Jones has always been interesting to me. I thought it was a lot to give up for him at first, but the truth is it worked. Julio Jones caught the ball that should have won us the Super Bowl. The coaching lost the Super Bowl. So it's kind of like the Saints thing. When you go all in on a player and you get right there, but you don't get the results, is it a bad move? And if Dan Quinn runs clock and we kick a field goal with the guy who made the most field goals in the NFL, we win a Super Bowl, would it have been worth it? The answer is yes. After winning that Super Bowl, if you missed the playoffs a couple of years, are you still tripping like we are now? Probably not. The fact that we have done nothing but go down ever since the Super Bowl loss when you had it in hand, and there's been no improvement. There has been no playoff, forging. And now if you don't go to playoffs this year, it'll be 4 years since you've been to the playoffs. It changes the narrative of what Julio Jones is worth, should have been worth, should be worth. My thing is now he's in the autumn of his career and making $19 million a year. Unless he's scoring 9 or 10 touchdowns, he's making too much money. Now, you could argue, well, without Julio, Matt Ryan doesn't have the yards. We don't have a shot. We're not in these games. Yeah, you could say that, but there's a reason why we don't have money for the defense is because Matt Ryan and Julio Jones were getting $66 million. They were getting 36% of the cap.
Right.
That's the reason why you have no defense. So to me, it's on how you view it. If you think Julio Jones is a necessary component for the Falcons and Matt Ryan to be comfortable, fix the defense and they'll be fine, I'm okay with that. If you think he jumped the line because you really gave him a contract a year too early, if you jump the line and you paid him too much, then make him go out there and earn it or move him and get what's best for the Falcons down the road. I can see that perspective too.
Yeah, I was going to say that same thing. Like there is we're looking at a number and it's counting down because at some point in time, we're going to look up and the value won't be there for Julio. So you'll ultimately be left holding the bag. So if there's going to be a time and place to where you can say, okay, we see what Calvin Ridley's doing. He's doing Julio-like things. We see Julio is making big plays, but as soon as he make that big play, he got to come out to the sideline because he's holding his hamstring. So there's a lot of people who will tell you that we need to get rid of Julio while he still has a decent value.
But people would also say he's doing his job. You know, Julio Jones does his job. The Falcons aren't losing games because Julio Jones isn't doing his job. That he's doing his job and the defense is giving up leads, or Matt Ryan is throwing 2 picks in LA against the Chargers, throwing a pick at home against the Bears, throwing picks against the Lions. And that's why we're losing. And then, you know, some people will say, you know, when he comes off the field and we don't know he's coming off, that hurts Matt Ryan and the offensive coordinator when you got plays and a player that's not available. So there's just too many questions. I want things for the Falcons to be simplified and to be in order with what people's production is. I don't care if somebody's getting $40 million or $19 million a year, if they are producing and earning the money. If they're not, it's giving us, the fans, a bad product. And I'm happy they got it. It's not helping me send in my section because they got their money.
True. And just real quick before I let you go, I wanted to get your take. We talked about the draft. We talked about it in terms of the Falcons' perspective. But the quarterback dynamic is what I think is pretty fascinating with this draft, is the fact that before the season started, before the college season started, it was Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields is neck and neck. And somehow it emerged that Trevor Lawrence is the clear-cut front runner. Then it became, it's Trevor, Justin, Zach Wilson. And then it became, and depending on what day you're looking at someone talk or listening to someone talk, you'll get a different response. I heard today that it was Zach Wilson was the clear-cut number one. And I'm like, well, damn, what is it? Is it just, we just saw Zach today at his pro day and we feel like he has more talent? Or what's your perspective if you had to rank and throwing in Trey, if you had to rank those 4 quarterbacks, where do you see them?
Well, to your point, I think it's silly every year. You know, what in the Sam Hill changes from the last pass and the last snap those quarterbacks called in their bowl game or their final regular season game, from then to the period in between the draft when all of a sudden guys are jumping up and moving down? Nothing. So at the end of it, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields were the best 2 quarterbacks in college football. And the 2, I think, charged with, you know, being franchise changers. I don't understand how that changed when nobody's played any more games. That being said, with nothing changing, you still have to do your due diligence. The one person I don't know enough about is Trey Lance. I've looked at some of his video and he looks good, but my question is, if he was that great, why wasn't he in the ACC? Why wasn't he in the SEC? How did all of these teams who definitely need quarterbacks pass over him, and him running over lesser players? I don't know what that means, you know, with his ability to read and recognize and to get off in the NFL against better players. So it hasn't changed for me. I still think it's Trevor Lawrence, it's Justin Fields, it's Zach Wilson, it's Mac Jones, then Trey Lance. To me, that's just how I rank them based on what I saw with my own eyes. Yeah. That being said, you know, sometimes guys get it right and they get it wrong. Somebody took Mitch Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, and now Mitch Trubisky is backing up in Buffalo.
He's about to say whoever, and that GM is kicking himself as we speak.
It's over.
Right.
It's all over.
So once again, I appreciate you coming out. I would look. Can you tell everyone where they can see you? I talked about you being on 680 The Fan. I talked about the drop step. Can you tell everyone where they can talk, interact with Home Team Brandon Lee?
Sure thing. Monday through Friday on Sports Radio 680 The Fan, 9 to 11. Co-host the show with Joe Hamilton, greatest quarterback in the history of Georgia Tech. Man's name is on the building, and everybody can have a name on a building. We do the show from 9 to 11, and then we do the Drop Step ATL podcast on Mondays and Wednesdays, kind of go over the Hawks, but make it generic NBA talk as well. So you can do that. You can find me on Instagram or on Twitter at HomeTeam Leak, Leak. And I like to respond. I like to have good conversation. I like to agree. I like to disagree. I just like to hear good opinions and see if we can have fun and hopefully get some championships here in Atlanta.
I'm all the way with that. Once again, Home Team, I greatly appreciate you taking the time out, man. Stay safe out in these streets. And I'll holler at you later.
Appreciate you, Commish.